How's it rockin', Dween Nation? This is the Dween Sports Podcast. We're about to get underway. But before we do, we'd love if you could like, comment, subscribe, or share. We are posting weekly sports content, and we want to build up the brand that is Dween Sports. Thank you all, and enjoy. Welcome in, Dween Nation. This is your host, Justin Paez, alongside Genoa Agudelo, and the divisional round of the NFL playoffs for 2025 have wrapped up as of 30 minutes ago with the Buffalo Bills beating the Ravens. And we're here to discuss every game that happened. There was 2 games yesterday, 2 games today. All were pretty interesting. Definitely the big upset that we'll definitely have to dive into and more. But before we do, how you doing, Genoa?
Yo, Dween Nation, Justin. I'm hurting a little bit. Obviously, here we're in the Texans cap here. Our season's over, but as a Texans fan, you're appreciative. You have your franchise guy. You're rolling with CJ all day, every day there. And so, other than that, Justin, I'm doing good. A pretty wacky divisional round there, especially the finish to tonight's main event. I would say over there in Buffalo. And so excited to break down these divisional matchups. And now, Justin, we're down to the final four, which we'll get into later next week, later up this upcoming week, Doing Nation. But other than that, Justin, what a divisional roundup, and we're closer to crowning a champion.
Yeah, and the biggest thing too, which I don't know if a lot of Dween Nation knows, today this episode marks 1 year of Dween Sports as a podcast. It's been super fun with you, my brother. We keep wanting to build this up, and we will keep doing so. But I can't believe it's already been a year at it. We got slow and steady progress, but we're going to continue to build, and then you'll see us soon enough on TV screens. The sky is the limit for this podcast.
Hey, time goes by fast when you're having fun, brother. So it's definitely an honor. We can just keep going. We're gonna keep going. Eventually, we're gonna be at one of these Super Bowls, and we're gonna take off. So we just gotta keep working. So keep bearing with us, Dween Nation.
Definitely. And let's jump into these games. And unfortunately, we have to start off with the first one where our hometown team does not pull it off. It's the Houston Texans going down to the Chiefs, 23-14. We talked about this last week, though. We did expect it to be somewhat close, but we expected the Chiefs to pull away. We did not love the manner at which it happened. I would like to get your take on the whole ref situation and just the game in its entirety.
Yeah, Justin, I mean, you don't want to be that fan, that guy that's like, blames it on the refs. And, obviously, as Rockets fans as well, we had those moments as well in the playoffs. But in some ways, it did feel like the refs were favoring the Chiefs there just because I seen CJ take some hits, didn't get called. And then I seen a play where 2 of my defensive tackles are butting heads and Mahomes is getting the call. So that right there is just really what limits it. That first drive, right? I mean, they get the ball right. We kick off. They receive the ball first. It was a big kickoff return. I think it was by Samaji P Ryan. I forgot who it was. It might have been P Ryan, but regardless, they get it to like the 30. The ball gets fumbled. We aren't able to recover, and automatically, Mahomes is already in our territory. So that's when I knew we were in some bit of some trouble there. And then obviously they were able to hit 2 field goals for their first points of the games there, and it was just like we weren't able to catch up. But then Justin, we get into the end of the game, Mixon scores, and then Kaimi misses the extra point there, and we're still down by 1. And I just feel like the Texans just never felt mentally in it. Like their heart was in it, I think, but they just felt like they just didn't have a chance because what they were up against, they felt like. I don't think we should blame all the refs there because we did have some opportunities after defense got some stops. We were, able to score. We just once again, it just comes down to our offensive line there in Houston, Justin, just being absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, it just seems as soon as CJ takes his second step back from his drop back, he's already getting pressured, and he's always running to the right. And the last couple games, it's been unusual seeing CJ just run the ball and getting yards, right? Even at the University of Ohio State, he wasn't really the biggest running quarterback, right? He wouldn't really have over 5 to 10 rushing yards a game, so it was really uncommon for these past couple games for CJ to run. He was trying to do it this game, but it just didn't work out. And then lastly, it just comes down to our injuries. It's just the fact that we don't have Diggs, a veteran there who's been, who's played playoff games in Kansas City. Maybe a guy like, Tank Dell who has that chemistry with CJ Stroud. Ultimately, you just got to knock out the Chiefs when you have the chance. Whenever you have that chance, if you don't knock them out, that's where you lose the game. And unfortunately, my Texans weren't able to knock him out, right? I mean, Hopkins didn't even have a catch. I think
Right.
Marquise Hollywood Brown was locked out of a catch in the second half. Obviously, Travis Kelsey's the one guy you got to look after. He's had a down season, but in the playoffs, you still got to respect him. And I feel like at the end, Justin, it just experience beats out, inexperience. And I feel like this is the loss that we need as a franchise going forward.
Yeah, it's crazy to see that Mahomes actually only completed passes to 4 different players, so not that many. Kelsey, though, you're right. He has been the killer in playoffs for his entire career, and the Texans didn't have an answer for that. But candidly, with that whole ref situation, as a fan, I've gone through all the stages. Obviously, there was anger. 3 different big calls. The one, obviously, where Mahomes is running around, decides to slide late, doesn't even really get touched. They call the unnecessary roughness. Then the Will Anderson one was which earlier in the game, and then on our first Texans drive, the Dalton Schultz hip drop tackle
Yeah.
uncalled. So there was a
Justin Reed field goal. Oh, I'm sorry. The Justin Reed, was that offsides? That field goal attempt.
oh
The
I didn't,
second the second field goal attempt where Kaimi missed. I think C.J. Stroud was on the sideline indicating that he thought Justin Reed was offsides, which could have ended up a first down. I think that might have been 4th and 4 there. But anyways, yeah, just many things didn't go our way.
and obviously, yeah, like the refs, there's always ref penalties each game, so that's what you kind of have to somewhat put past you. Even though they really
Yeah.
should have some sort of review system. I feel like refs to me, they're like they make mistakes. Refs make mistakes. They're human.
Yeah.
Why make that like such a defining play when you can just go back and look at it?
I will say that you remember that NFC Championship from like 4 or 5 years ago between the Saints and the Rams, and that hit. I think it was on Hightower. Anyways, it was a Rams player hitting a defensive Saints player. I think the next year, Justin, they brought back reviews for like penalties. Like that was a new thing they introduced, and it was like a year like one and done. That next year, after that following season, it was gone. So I don't know. Maybe that's something they do look into, but I doubt that they'll bring it back just because they got rid of it a few
Right.
years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. But and also, CJ, even though he had some really good scramble plays throughout the game. He was also seemingly having a nagging knee injury. Every time he ran out of bounds, there was a little something. He would limp a little bit. I don't know if that affected him at all. But it again came to the offense, mainly the O line. I think Slowick did fine play calling in this game. There wasn't too bad. Mixon did really well. I wish they actually ran Mixon more. He was getting chunk plays all game against a really tough defense. But
Yeah.
for Houston, I wouldn't be too down. As you mentioned, this could be a franchise-changing kind of game. You come into next year, you know what you need. You need a O-line, wide receiver. I think your defense is going to be dangerous next season. It's going to get
Yeah.
even better. It's just that offense, man. It's just that offense. I think obviously Stroud will have a better year. In a down year, you still made the divisional round of the playoffs. Because everybody was saying the sophomore slump for Stroud and this offense, they still made a divisional round of the NFL playoffs. So I think that things are still in a good lens for them. As for the Chiefs, I didn't see too much that got me super excited. Obviously, Kelsey had the good game. Mahomes didn't do that well to me. He had that obviously the touchdown to Kelsey was super impressive as he was falling. But nothing too crazy. He had I guess again came to the refs and me was like that one flop play he was trying to get a penalty. Another one he was yelling at the ref to call something.
Yeah.
I was getting upset, and I was watching it with our Theo David, and him. It was just back and forth. Everybody was just screaming at the television. But anyway, the Chiefs move on. They do have the Chiefs too. They pull out these games that they close. They're close, but they always come out on top. I think this could be that Kelsey home stretch. I think if they win this 3-peat, he might call it kind of season. Like,
Mhm.
but yeah, it just shows that they can pull it off. And then of course the spread. I didn't put any money on that, but the spread was 9.5, and the Chiefs got it to 9. I know a lot of people were upset with that, but those are just a few talking points for this
Yeah.
game. Chiefs make another conference championship. Every year that Mahomes has played in the NFL, he has made a conference championship. So impressive for them. Moving to the next game, though, the game that I think has been the most exciting and most surprising game of this weekend was the Commanders defeating the Lions 45-31. The Lions, the number 1 seed, who came off the bye, playing the 6th seed Commanders, with a rookie quarterback, a first-year coach, and they just could not stop Jaden Daniels in this offense. Jared Goff had 4 turnovers in this game, I believe. So he was not impressive. But yeah, Jaden Daniels, man, he is now jumped up to be a top 5 quarterback, top 6 quarterback I would want as my quarterback in the NFL. He has just been great. He can make plays on his legs. He's been making great throws. He's making big plays to like guys like De'Ami Brown and old man Zach Ertz, who's like, "Oh, give me a catch! Oh, I got a first." Like he's old and he's getting plays. Obviously, Terry McLaurin's really good, but super impressive that they're pulling this all off. Hopefully, because there's now some rumblings that after the season, Cliff Kingsbury might be headed to a head coaching gig. That would hurt the offense. But just in this game particularly, anything can happen next week now that they're in the conference championship. That would be crazy if they made a Super Bowl. Going from 4-13 to a Super Bowl appearance would be super interesting. As for the Lions, I am unfortunately going to be sitting here on a sour note. I think that they lose Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn this offseason. Definitely Aaron Glenn. And the fact that you see Jared Goff kind of unravel. I know he will be the quarterback for them next year, but I think maybe they're going to start realizing that he's not the guy that will lead them to a Super Bowl. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on this game. Obviously, Jameer is great. Amon-Ra, Sam Laporta, Montgomery, those are studs. But what are your thoughts of this game? Jared Goff, the state of the Lions, the state of the Commanders.
Justin, I mean, where do I even start there? I mean, this is one of the biggest upsets in divisional round history. I mean, just to name a few, Justin. Obviously, those 2 Giants Super Bowl runs that they had, they went on the road and upset Green Bay, who was hot both times. One was Brett Favre led, the other Aaron Rodgers led. There's another one involving Aaron Rodgers just a few years ago where he was the number 1 seed. It was a route to his second back-to-back MVP. I think it was 4th overall, and lost to the Niners, led by Jimmy Garoppolo. They ended up going to the NFC title game. And, those divisional matchups don't even compare to this one. This one was like a heartbreak, Justin. Like, I just named games that involved MVPs and future Hall of Famers. But this game doesn't not yet. We don't think maybe Gibbs could be in the Hall of Fame one day. Who knows? But this was like one of the biggest heartbreaks I've ever seen, Justin, because we wanted to see the Lions at least in the NFC title game. At least. Like, okay, they could get Philly, which would be the first versus the second seed, or they can get a rematch versus, Stafford, who's, been, knocking at their door. I want my revenge, as a former Lion. So we were going to get one of those matchups. So to me, that was exciting because the winner of that matchup can get the Chiefs or maybe the Bills. But, it's just like now you get Washington and Philly, and don't get me wrong, that's a great NFC title game, but you want to see Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jameer Gibbs has become one of the most entertaining football players in all of pro. I mean, he's up there with Saquon, Derrick Henry, Jettas, and Jamar Chase as far as like most electrifying, entertaining players to watch right now. And Justin, you and I know that we're big fantasy guys there. This is a fantasy football podcast at the end of the day. However, this guy Gibbs, I mean, if you pick him number 1 next year, I ain't batting an eye at you. I'd take him. I mean, you can pick him up. I mean, what a great fantasy, football draft we're gonna have this next season. But this is one of the most electrifying teams we've seen, Justin. The way they went out was just sad. I mean, maybe if Washington kicked a walk-off field goal, like Goff didn't get the football, maybe like I'd be like, all right, well, Lions did. But I mean, right before halftime, Goff is throwing an interception. I think that was the last 2 drives of the game. Goff is just. I mean, he just has those games where he's just floppy, and it just sucks to see it happen at home. Amon-Ra had 137 receiving yards. Gibbs had a total of like 140 yards there. And it's just sad to see them go out. Even Laporta had a great game, right, Justin? During the season, he was very quiet, really. He was very quiet. He wasn't really involved in the passing game. And then he even had some catches yesterday that was very impressive. And it's just like, and we predicted the final score to be like 31-19 or something like that. They scored 31. But I guess you got to look at Detroit's defense and be like, dang, like they could have had it. Lastly, going into Washington, I mean, wow, Justin, what a surprise. I mean, what a last year and a half it's been for Jaden Daniels. I mean, he goes into LSU, into the footsteps of Joe Burrow. Obviously, they didn't win a natty, but he wins Heisman. And then he gets drafted, the following draft with the 2nd pick overall. The Commanders are like, man, maybe they could make some noise. And one last thing, I remember, Justin, we're going to go to an Indian restaurant in the summer. and you were over, and I was editing a Jaden Daniels video before we went out to eat, and little did I know that was going to be a starting quarterback in the NFC Championship game. It's mind blowing for sure.
Yeah, I mean he's only the sixth quarterback to ever do that as a rookie. He's just
Wow.
leading this. He looks so composed and poised. No fear, no anxiety. He's phenomenal. That make it, to me the cool thing about next week is I think that game's also going to be very high scoring, very interesting because the two games that we've gotten from Washington and Philadelphia have been electrifying games this season. But it's crazy to see that the Commanders their rise. We always get that every year. There's a team that does the unexpected, but this team I think has done more than we've ever seen, or at least for a long time. Besides maybe the Bengals a handful of years ago. But yeah, the Commanders pull it off. The state of the Lions to me is somewhat in question. Besides their star players like Gibbs, Amon-Ra, Laporta, but with coaching and stuff, I think that the smartness, the great play calling of Ben Johnson might not be there for them next season. We will see, but we got to keep an eye on the Lions because they unfortunately go down as a number one seed. Moving on to the Sunday slate, the snowy game of the Los Angeles Rams and the Philadelphia Eagles, a game that was neck and neck for just about all the game. Saquon Barkley obviously is the star out of the game. He has been so good, and poor Rams because they got two of his best games he's ever played, over 200 yards, two touchdowns, two big house call kind of. His touchdowns are two house calls, 60 plus yards. Saquon's just too good, man, and I think that he should have deserved like more MVP talk because the way he's playing, he could have beat the all-time rushing record if he really wanted to, but he decided not to rest to be ready for this playoff run. And now they get a home game against a division rival that they most of the time have their number. So things are looking really good for the Eagles. To me, if I'm Philadelphia, I'm really happy the Lions lost and that you pulled off this victory here to play the Commanders. Because although the Commanders did upset the Lions in impressive fashion, I think the Eagles know this team. They barely lost to Washington with Kenny Pickett at quarterback a month ago. So I think Philly's really happy with the spot they're in. I think the question now and the uncertainty is with Jalen Hurts with the injury that kind of seemed like it happened. He still played throughout the rest of the game, but he wasn't very mobile. He did come out after the game and say that he's confident he will play, but at what percent health will it be? Will we be getting that 40-yard touchdown run that we saw from him in the beginning of this Rams game, or will we be seeing a little bit more pocket pass or a little bit more handed off to Mr. Saquon? But just in this game in particular, Saquon is kind of the only star I can pick out for the Eagles side. AJ didn't have that big of a game. None of the receivers really did. And then for the Rams side, they almost pulled it off. I saw the Saquon 78-yard touchdown, and I started texting people, and I was like, EAGLES, because I'm an Eagles fan. I was like, this is a great. We're moving on in the next round, and then it was like a minute and a half later, the Rams score all of a sudden. The Eagles defense just they didn't even get on the field. It seems. And then obviously they stopped the Eagles, and then there's a chance for the Rams to win. But Jalen Carter gets the big sack, and then they don't pull it off. But for the Rams, to me, they're in a state of limbo. Does Stafford come back next year? Obviously, you got Puka, but is Cooper Kupp, is he ready to be put on the shelf? Obviously, you got Kyron too, and the defense is really impressive moving forward. But the question marks with your former Triple Crown wide receiver and quarterback, what are your thoughts, though, with the Rams in this game and the future?
Well, Justin, first off, I wouldn't be surprised if Stafford just hangs it up. I mean, he's not really the type of guy that would announce it before the season. He's not really that type of guy that expects like a farewell tour kind of thing. He doesn't really want that attention, nor do I think the Rams do in general. So that could be a possibility. If not, if Stafford returns and plays another season, obviously the Rams are going to be looking to draft the quarterback within the first couple rounds of next year's draft. Also, Justin, you have to question how long is Sean McVay going to be coaching, right? I don't think he wants to be coaching for that long. If you remember, just like a year or two ago, he was thinking of retiring, like the year
Right.
after they won the Super Bowl. And he was kind of thinking of retiring when Aaron Donald already retired. So, and Aaron Donald has now been retired a season. And so it's like, who's going to be next? Like kind of the falling dominoes there. And one thing I want to mention, it's like, Cooper Cup, he like, there was a point in these past couple seasons before the season where it was like, man, Stafford and Cooper Cup, probably a top 5 duo in the league. Like, man, their chemistry is unbelievable. But then like last year, Puka gets involved, and it's like, nah, Cooper Cup's still eating. But then like this year, like the back half of the last 6 or 7 games, it was like he just wasn't interested in being in it. It was like he was disinvolved. It was more like the Puka show. Maybe Cooper Cup like felt like not involved. Maybe it was like a Garrett Wilson situation when Devontae Adams is coming into town. And so it's like, I don't know, it was something odd about it, like a little off. Like I think Cooper Cup finished today with like 40 or 50 yards receiving, but I mean, it's not a guy that Stafford looks for anymore. There's some questions there that Los Angeles actually needs to answer that no one's really talking about there. It's the quarterback as well as the situation with Cooper Cup there, and the future of Sean McVay. Like if he can sign an extension for 6-7 years, like he's at that age where he can. You know what I'm saying? He can make a name of himself for a top 10 coach. Obviously, I think if McVay were to retire this season, you can make a case for the Hall of Fame just because he's had so much success in a short time with the Super Bowl. But there's just some things there to answer up there in Los Angeles, and so I know they'll get it figured out as they have in the past. As for Philadelphia, that's now moving on there, Justin. The way they've been drafting there with Howie Roseman has been impressive. Got all those Bulldogs on the defense. Even with Brandon Graham hurt, they're still able to make plays with Nakobe Dean out. I think Dean got hurt last week against Green Bay, and so with that defense there, they're still being led. And not to mention that I completely forgot that Fletcher Cox retired last year, and he was an outstanding defensive tackle there in those 2 Super Bowl runs that the Eagles had in this era. And so, Justin, I really like their defense, the way they've been able to put this offense together. My only question about Philadelphia, and I saw it again today, is something is going on with A.J. Brown. I don't mean to be dramatic. I don't want to be that kind of guy. But I hope this next week against Washington, I really want to see a 100-yard game out of A.J. Brown. I want to have a 2-3 touchdown game from Jalen Hurts. I need this to be an explosive game. Like looking at what Saquon's been able to do Washington this year. I mean, he has run 2 house calls against Washington both games, right? He had that Thursday night matchup against Washington. He had a house call that put that game away. And then looking at the second matchup in Washington where they lost, he started things hot there. He had 150 yards and 2 touchdowns in the second matchup against Washington. So I'm not worried about Saquon in this matchup against Washington. The question is, how can they get A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith involved?
Yeah, and the good thing for AJ, because I mean it has been bad, but it's kind of been bad for everybody. Because Jalen Hurts is just not passing the rock that often. He had 15 completions in this game for only 128 yards. But as for next week, A.J. Brown has averaged over 115 yards in his last 4 contests against the Commanders. He's had 4 touchdowns, or he's had 5 touchdowns in his last 4 games against them. So he has some history of doing well. And maybe, I mean, they're winning these games, so it's like, you could argue, like, I mean, what they're doing now is working, with Saquon being like the main and really only guy they're relying on to get things done. So there is some worry. I don't know if it's like a in the locker room worry. I just think it might be scheme wise, and maybe, I don't know, Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is not the best passer in the world, and I think they know that, and they know that they can just give Saquon the rock a bunch. But we'll see. We will see with that game. But I think the Eagles. I'm leaning towards Philly heading towards the Super Bowl, and that's not a bias. I think that even with the Commanders looking so freaking good, I think that Philadelphia is gonna. I think AJ Brett. You know what? I think I'm gonna give a touchdown guarantee to AJ next week.
Okay.
I think that he's definitely in line for it. We'll see if the weather, because weather also could have affected this game. It was snowy, and so they might have relied on the run game more there. But yeah, good.
I will. No, I was going to say, we'll say that I'm 2 wins away from having my Super Bowl matchup come to life there. My prediction in the preseason, I did have Kansas City and Philadelphia in the Super Bowl. So hopefully I'm wrong on the AFC side, because, I mean, we would love to see Josh Allen versus the Commanders, but we really would love to see Josh Allen versus Philly. Two crazy fan bases there. So just want to put that out there.
No, that you should get some props for that. I mean, my two teams got eliminated this week. I had Detroit and Houston to start the year. That didn't pay out, but you're still alive. Philadelphia and Kansas City, even though we want to see some new fresh faces in the Super Bowl. And that leads us to this last game with the Ravens and the Bills. What a game it was. We saw Lamar struggle, which we hadn't really seen all season long, besides maybe the one game against Pittsburgh. But what I was more shocked about is only 16 carries for Derrick Henry. I thought that, because he looked good. He was having some really good runs. I thought that he might be the focal point to get things done today, but some mistakes from Lamar, and then obviously I think the big storyline, which got me upset because I was more of the fan in this aspect. I just wanted the game to keep going. I wanted maybe an overtime, but Mark Andrews with the fumble and then the drop 2-point conversion. Is there talks that need to be made with him, because he hasn't been super impressive this year compared to seasons before? But what are your thoughts with him and this game?
Well, Justin, they do have Isaiah Likely, who had 70 yards and a touchdown today. So, not to mention he had that game week 1, so he ended the season, or started the season right, and even in the loss, still ends strong there with Isaiah Likely. But you know what, Justin? You know, I mean, they just need to add some wide receivers there. I mean, and I don't think they necessarily need to part ways with Andrews, but if it comes down to it being like a contract situation, something along the lines of that, then yeah, you can part ways. But my goodness, Justin, get Lamar an MVP. I mean, the guy that you guys drafted in last year's draft, 2 drafts ago, didn't even play today in Zay Flowers. Bateman, he's played good, but you're not going to expect to go on the road in Buffalo and knock off your MVP, rival there in Josh Allen, who, I mean, he doesn't have wide receivers, but I think it just works for him better than Lamar does. There's just something about this Buffalo team that just runs through Josh Allen completely, as where this team has Derrick Henry. I mean, come on, just get you a couple wide receivers and you're good. But I mean, unfortunately, I didn't want this game to end, Justin. Right? I mean, it had a little bit of a tad bit of a slow start. I guess Lamar, he starts the game swinging, they score, and it's like, oh man, Ravens are on fire, and then it's just like they slow down a little bit, and then they don't score touchdowns to the second half, right? So it was just, I don't know. I really wish that there was more time. I feel like Lamar was getting his groove in, and had they tied that, I mean, I wouldn't say Josh Allen wouldn't lead a game-winning field goal drive, but you got to give some props there to Baltimore's defense, and maybe hope that they can get a stop. But man, Justin, what this game would have been awesome if it had win it overtime there. But the most impressive thing is that Josh Allen only 127 yards there, but he does get the 2 scores, and it's just like, I feel like that's just enough to give him the MVP there, Justin. I don't know what you think about it. I feel like this game was kind of like for the MVP there. It was like anonymously, like on a cloud, floating, and like, here Lamar, like, floating on both sidelines. I don't know if you think that. I think for first answer, do you think this game was for the MVP, and like, how do you think this dictates the voting?
Well, I think for voting, they look more to regular season, obviously, and I just think. But if you look at it, they both, at least in this game, they didn't really have pass catching options. The Bills haven't had it all year. The Ravens were missing Zay Flowers. But yeah, I do think Josh Allen has locked up the MVP for himself. He's been tremendous. And he showed it by beating Lamar, head to head. I know it was in Buffalo, so that gave him some bit of an advantage. But yeah, I mean, but the thing is, Lamar was that close too. It was a Mark Andrews catch away from going to overtime, and then you never know what could have happened. But Lamar made, he had 2 turnovers. He had some mistakes, unlike Josh Allen did today. But yeah, I mean, now we go and we have this Bills-Chiefs matchup where the Bills won in the regular season, but the Chiefs have their number in the playoffs. So that breeds for some interesting conversations that we will have later this week on Wednesday. But yeah, man, it was, to me, it was going to be heartbreaking either way. If the Bills had lost, I would have been like, dang, they keep getting close but never pulling it off. I would have felt for Josh Allen, but then the same kind of story for Lamar. He hasn't been able to pull it off. And I also wanted Derrick Henry to get a title. He's been so good. So it was really either way. It was a double-edged sword. It was going to be bittersweet, regardless of the winner. But the Bills pull it out at home, and now we get Josh Allen, Mahomes, and I will be wearing a Josh Allen jersey for that game because I don't want to see. Even though it's great to witness history and see maybe the new GOAT be named if they can win this three-peat. I want some new fresh faces and I at least you know what I might take that back as long as I don't see dumb stuff like refs changing games and
Yeah.
they're just not relying on not like on the field. Like let's let the players win and lose these games kind of thing.
Mhm.
At least in these Kansas City games, it feels like maybe we hyper focus on these Chiefs games to find the penalties, but we often see it. So I we have a set for the conference championships are set. Chiefs and Bills, Eagles and Commanders. We have an NFC East conference championship, which is super crazy. If you had told me the Commanders would have made it yesterday or 2 days ago or last year or 3 weeks ago, I would have said you're nuts. But they have done it. So impressive to them on already great season. And we're excited to discuss it more in depth later this week. But also, if you're curious, the college football playoff, the championship, the Natty, is today. By the time you're listening to this, if you're curious on who do you think is going to win, why do we think a certain team's going to win? We have an episode posted out there. It's only 17 minutes long. Go check it out. Came out, I believe, last Thursday or Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday.
Yeah.
So it was last week. Go check it out. Thank you, Dwayne Nation. I posted something on TikTok that, hey, TikTok's getting banned. Come to IG, everything like that. You should still do that, even though TikTok is, temporarily back. So go there too. We're everywhere. So just check us out. Thank you guys for listening. And Genoa, send us out.
Yo, Dwayne Nation, this was our divisional roundups recap there. Let us know what you guys think in the comments below. If you're happy, if your team won, if your team lost. And what are your thoughts going forward into next week there as we are on the road to crowning a champion there, the road to the Super Bowl, the road to New Orleans there. So let us know down low. We love you guys. Thanks for watching. And as always,
Peace.
peace.